Welcome to Corona Stories from Observing the Process. I'm your host, Alex Greenberg. And before we start, I'm hoping you can help me out by supporting the show. You can do this by going to my website, observingtheprocess.com. For just $5 a month or $50 for the year, you can become a monthly supporter. This show relies on listener support to stay on the air. So if you find this content valuable, I hope you will consider subscribing. You can find a link to subscribe in the description of this podcast. If you can't support monthly, no worries. You can help out by rating and reviewing on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. You can share it with your friends, you can blog about it, or discuss it on your own podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you for supporting the show. Listeners like you make it possible. If you are looking for information on how to protect yourself and stay safe from COVID-19, please get information from the CDC or the World Health Organization. Today on the show, I had Kristian Hansen. Kristian is the CEO of Push Media and is based between Shanghai and Norway. He's originally from Norway as well. Please welcome Kristian Hansen.
In the land of China, people hardly got nothing at all.
No possessions?
And in China, they never go to church.
No religion too?
Or do magic.
Well, it's easy if you try, Dick.
Yo, yo, yo. Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, good. I'm in Norway at the moment.
Yeah.
Good weather.
Are
Easter.
you
So
in
good.
Oslo or are you up north?
I'm in Oslo at the moment. So yeah, actually there's like a quarantine to go between from the south to the north. So I was supposed to go to the north to my hometown, but I can't even go there. I have to be in quarantine if I go there.
Wow. I didn't know Norway was doing that. Yeah, we'll definitely get into that. I'm interested to see how Norway is handling the situation. But I guess before we start, could you give a brief introduction of yourself, where you're based, what you do for work, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my name is Kristian. I am the CEO and executive producer at Push. I mean, I think you've talked about Push many times before, but we're like a small media company, creative agency, production house, Shanghai, Japan, Tokyo, and also in LA. So kind of all over the world. So yeah, I mean, we produce a lot of commercials and a lot of content in general for a lot of different brands.
Cool. And where and when and how did you first hear about the coronavirus?
Must have been like mid-January, I guess, like a couple weeks before Chinese New Year, 2 or 3 weeks before Chinese New Year, I assume.
Yeah,
and,
that's when it like broke out for sure. That's when I heard about it as well.
Yeah. Exactly. That's when everyone, I mean, because we both have like ties to China, so we were hearing about it quite early for sure. And like, I mean, all the people that we know were quite heavily affected a bit, like fairly early. So, yeah.
And where in the world were you?
I was actually in Norway then. We were like kind of staying over in Norway, like over Christmas and New Year's. And then I was supposed to just stick around and go back to China after Chinese New Year. But yeah, I tried pretty hard. But never made it. And actually, it was kind of a weird situation because we've just opened our Tokyo office, and we were gonna go to Japan to work out of the Tokyo office for a little bit, but then had tickets down to Shanghai. But then, like all of our colleagues in Shanghai was saying, like it's probably not the best time to come. You should probably wait it out, see if it gets better. And it was still like everyone's like unsure what was gonna happen. But then, yeah, you know, China went on full lockdown while we were there. So we were actually in Tokyo for a full month, just like staying in a hotel and like kind of doing that week by week, trying to go to Shanghai, but never ended up going. And now we just went back here, and luckily we can like stay in our house in Norway for this past like at least the past month when it's been like the most serious here.
Right. So from what month, like when were you in Japan? Like February-ish or?
Yeah, pretty much like all of I think we came back here like early March.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
yeah, we've been here for the last 5 weeks.
What was it like in Japan then? Because I haven't actually talked to anyone over there. Was like to my understand, actually I have one friend who lives over there, but he says they're actually not taking it too seriously, which I was kind of surprised. What was your experience like in Japan?
Yeah, so I mean, Japan was kind of weird because like China was definitely taking it very seriously. There was like full lockdown. We were like reading all these crazy numbers from China, but at the same time, we were in Japan, who has like I believe like close to 50% of all the tourism in Japan is from China, and
Hmm.
like tons of business are being done between Japan and China. So of course, like we were kind of expecting it to get kind of hectic in Japan as well. But actually, it was pretty chill, to be honest. Like people are just cautious. I guess it's because they've kind of experienced SARS and a
Hmm.
bunch of other things before. And then I guess the culture, like when we were still in Japan or just coming back from Japan, when Italy was going like really crazy. And I mean, it seems logical to me that Japan is kind of a little bit safer because compared to Italy, in Italy people live in like a massive family and they're all kissing each other on the cheeks and they're close to each other. In Japan, it's like the total opposite. Yeah, like you wouldn't see one person on the street without a mask. People just aren't close to each other. People don't shake hands when they meet. It's like a totally different culture. So I mean, I also everyone was speculating that like, okay, it seems to be the right thing to do the isolation thing, regardless, just for safety. But the Olympics, like they were pushing pretty hard for the Olympics. So I really think it got down to that. Like they were not trying to be on isolation because of they're still trying to justify doing the Olympics, which they kind of
Oh.
now, right after the Olympics kind of got like officially postponed, then I heard from our colleague in Japan that they were starting to talk about going into isolation then.
Yeah, man, that's
So
a really good point. I didn't think about why they would not outwardly, for like PR, take it seriously, and it's because they wanted to try and keep the Olympics alive as long as possible. Maybe
yeah,
that's speculation on your part and mine, I would say. But you were
yeah,
there,
definitely
so
speculation. But yeah, I mean, but they were like forcing it pretty hard with the Olympics. I mean, it's a big deal, and
yeah.
like the prime minister or the president or whatever his role is. Actually, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting, but like he was pushing really hard for it. He
Hmm.
was determined that they would be doing the Olympics.
And that's also an
So
interesting what you mentioned because I talked to someone from Italy and I didn't like it clicks now, but the idea of just culture in general about how people kiss hello and live closer and very touchy-feely, I guess, is just the general culture in Italy. And it's, as you mentioned, the complete opposite in Japan, where people don't shake hands. In general, they might be wearing masks anyways. It's totally interesting
yeah,
to see how culture plays such a massive role.
yeah, for sure. And they all live with their like grandparents, and like they live in these like generational kind of houses where there's like just like everything from like grandparents to like their kids and their kids and their kids, and it's
Hmm.
like yeah, there's a lot of people living together and they have like they're close to everyone all the time, and you're like yeah, you're just close to everyone. Like you should go to the city town, like the town center, and like drink coffee every morning, and it's really different than in Japan.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
totally different.
yeah, definitely.
Okay,
So
so as
yeah,
let's move on with your story a little bit. You eventually get to Norway, and we just kind of definitely talked about how different cultures are handling the pandemic, Italy versus Japan. But now, if you could take a moment to talk about your experience in Norway.
yeah, I mean that was kind of weird because like I mean I guess one thing is like everyone was kind of worried about this, but no one thought it would kind of come. Like I guess you probably didn't either think it was come to where we are now.
No, I didn't.
And that's the same. Yeah, and that's the same thing in Norway. Like we had like one case, and the earlier cases was like really really poorly handled. I think like it was just. I mean, we're like a pretty naive country,
Hmm.
I guess, and like Norwegians have it really well. Like everyone is so incredibly well off in Norway. So that kind of creates a bit of naivety where like you don't really think things are kind of going to happen here. which I think was kind of part of why it was handled up like weirdly in the beginning. And, there was like a case I read. The first case actually was in my hometown. It came from a woman that had traveled from uh, like pretty much the epicenter of China. I can't remember exactly which city, but she got kind of evacuated from China. But then when she came to Norway, she got sent on like just a normal flight from Oslo to Tromsø with like all these other people, which is like kind of explains how not very seriously the government was taking. I guess it's not about taking it seriously, but just like people didn't really know kind of how it would escalate. So yeah, I think even the government was like shell shocked, and like there wasn't a system put in place to make sure that didn't happen.
Yeah, I think that might be more of the problem, is that like, because similar situation happened here in America, is that just more, there wasn't like a protocol put in place, or it wasn't being taken seriously. Like my friend, you might have met John Saw. He he was in Japan and China, and then he went to the States in Burlington. This was early February, mid-February, and he felt sick. He was going to the doctors like, listen, I've been to all these high-risk areas, like you're not even going to test me for the coronavirus. And they're like, no, like you don't like fully seem totally sick. And in China it'd be like instantly you're getting tested and you're quarantined no matter what. It's just like a matter of how certain countries handle situations, which I find interesting.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, so I think it was like a lot of naivety, but like after a while, like it went pretty hard. Like it didn't on this. I mean, it was quite a while where there was like a few cases here and there, but it hadn't really started spreading. And then it kind of went from that to like very heavy lockdown in a fairly short amount of time. I think it's like a month ago now.
You mentioned earlier, you were talking about how people in Norway are very well off. That interests me because you guys, I guess, I don't know the correct way to put it, maybe a socialist country, but I've read that one reason why you guys are quite well off is you have a massive oil reserve that kind of pays for a lot of the public welfare. Is that true? Or could you talk a little bit about that if you know anything about that? I'm just curious into that.
Yeah. I mean, we do. I don't really know the exact numbers, but it's like an insane amount of money in this kind of, it's actually called, official name is like the Norwegian Retirement Fund, I believe. And it's basically a fund because like all the oil in Norway is kind of owned by the government. I mean, Norway is very much like a kind of a peasant country before we found oil, which is like, yeah, it's definitely like stuck with us.
Massive
like,
come
like
up once you like struck gold, basically.
Totally, yeah. I mean, insane come up, but I mean, we have like all these traditions that are very like kind of peasant like still, which is like, I think coul, but like
I like it. I like dancing around the Christmas tree.
Yeah, yeah, you know about it. But yeah, no. So it's this big fund where like the government puts all the money that we get from oil and they invest it in like all kinds of things. Like we own real estate like all around the world, like Fifth Avenue, probably Champs-Élysées, and like crazy places like on Downing Street, and then like just tons and tons of stocks and bonds all over the world. And it's a massive fund of basically money that gets invested. It took a massive hit now because of the coronavirus, of course, but actually like the price of oil plummeted at the same time. And then since the Norwegian kroner is so kind of depends so much on oil, our currency dropped as well, which made like actually the oil fund didn't drop that much because all the investments are in USD, and compared to Norwegian kroners, it's still very, very strong. So it's actually just a bunch of luck. But I mean, you're right. Like when you say like we're a socialist country, that's exactly what we are. I mean, it's very, very much socialism. It's something that scares people in America for sure. It's like that term is like scary to people, but I mean, to me, it just means like free healthcare, free schools, free dental care. It's like all the good things. And I mean, we're still very much a democracy. So yeah. And I mean, I think that's one of the interesting things about this, actually. Like we have a government that is not very much supported in my kind of demography, I guess, like my age group and like where I live, like most people don't support. We have like kind of a right wing government at the moment, and people don't really back that much. But at this case, like it's been handled kind of after they got to the lockdown period, it's been handled really well, and it's like interesting to see. It's like very different from the news I read from the US. It's like there it's very polarizing and kind of divisive, but here it's like all of the different parties have kind of now just come together, like put all their differences aside, and like they're just trying to solve everything, and there's no kind of like battle on who's right and who's wrong and everything. Everyone seems to be on the same page, which seems like a positive thing. And I mean, it's definitely worked out. Like the results are pretty good here.
Interesting. One other question I had was about like here in America, the government put together a $2 trillion stimulus plan to aid in unemployment, and also just giving all Americans basically a $1,200 check. I was wondering if there's anything happening in Norway. Like, do you guys already have something in place that kind of keeps people afloat, or is there extra stimulus coming in for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, yes to kind of both. There's a massive kind of like stimulus package for businesses, which I don't know the number of, but it's very big compared to like the size of the country. But also, I mean, we have a very good kind of like system for this already in place, like very good kind of unemployment system. And another thing is like a lot of people in Norway, like a pretty big percentage of the people work for the government, which means they haven't been like temporarily laid off. So they still kind of get to keep their jobs, even though they're not actually going to their jobs. So the government is kind of taking that check, so they get their salaries as normal. And the other people that are not employed by the government, they have a pretty good system where you can just sign up to this like unemployment thing, and you get the 21st days. You get full salary after that. I think it's like 60% of your full salary for as long as you're temporarily laid off, basically. So, I mean, everyone's getting paid still, which is good. I think there's a bit of like a problem, just like practical issues with like how many people are laid off now, and just it takes time for people to get their money. But it's definitely a system.
I'm sure it's not nearly as big a problem as it is in America. I mean, we've had like 16 million people file for unemployment in the past 3 weeks, and when you look at a chart compared to 2008, and there was a crisis in '86 or something, it's microscopic compared to what's happening now. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And like Norway is like a microscopic country compared. Like we're 5.5 million people, so you have like more unemployed people. So
less than half of New York City.
Totally, yeah, and it's just easier to like take care of for sure. I mean, we have just a huge benefit, but I mean, there's it's good now. Like the stats are really, really drastically dropping, and like people are starting to kind of live more normal lives now. We were in like pretty like full on isolation for a while, but now it's turning very dramatically for the better, and there's like a lot of kind of optimism locally. I think most of the kind of things that are not so optimistic is more looking out in the world and looking at the US. And I mean, like I said before, we're just like so privileged. It's really hard to kind of feel bad for ourselves here in Norway. And everyone's so well off. The biggest discussion we've had, this is funny, you're going to think this is funny. So in the news, there's this massive beef, and everyone's like kind of like really pissed at the government because the cabins are like everyone's like life in Norway. Everyone like loves to go to their cabins. It's like one of the most important things. People celebrate Christmas and Easter, blah blah blah. And the government said, no, you can't go to your cabins. So full lockdown, no one can go to their cabins. And it's because like these places that the cabins are in doesn't have like a big hospital, or they can't really handle that. So they're saying, no, you guys have to stay home. And this is like the biggest debate. Everyone's pissed because they can't go to their cabins. And I mean, to me, that just like shows how good, how well off we are. Like, I mean, if that's our biggest issue, like, it's really not that bad.
Yeah,
So,
man. It makes it so much better for you when you can like make it relative and compare it to, you know, other people's situations. It's
I mean,
interesting.
totally. I mean, we're close to other, like, I mean, Italy is not that far, and like, I mean, everyone's like following what's happening in the US, and it's like really terrible. And if that's your biggest problem here, everything is quite good, actually.
Interesting to hear. Let's talk about the lockdown and a little bit
Yeah.
more about what's been happening in Oslo, just kind of the daily vibe, the, you know, going to the grocery store. That has there been any restrictions, and specifically also that lockdown that you mentioned? I didn't realize that Norway had quarantined like half of the country, the south and the north. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that's one thing. I think they're going to stop that pretty soon. But I mean, as far as the lockdown, I think when it started a month ago, it's really, really heavy. I mean, people are definitely no one I know is going to an office. Like, no one is going to work for sure. Everyone's working from home. Schools and kindergartens are closed. So obviously people that have kids, they really have to stay home. And in the beginning, like the first 3 weeks, 2 weeks at least, it was pretty heavy. Like, pretty much all stores were closed except for like grocery stores, and like, you know, most people were kind of just staying at home. And you can go to the grocery store, but it was like kind of weird vibe. Everyone was like trying to not get close to each other. People were like buying all the toilet paper like everywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
And, you know, but I mean, that changed quite dramatically, I would say, in the last week. Now it feels like things are more normal, and it feels like, you know, it just feels, you know, I mean, one thing I can say, like, we've done the opposite of Sweden, actually, which is like our neighboring country, and they haven't really closed down anything. And I mean, I'm surely they closed down something, but not that much, not even nearly to the extent that we have in Norway.
You know what I read is Sweden has an interesting, there's a theory that the only way to really beat this is to infect everyone, and there's a proper medical term for that. But I read, excuse me, but just the headline, as I always do.
Yeah,
and I don't know if you heard about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what they're trying to do. So they believe in like mass immunity. Which is, I mean, it kind of makes sense for, if you don't have a vaccine, that's like eventually everyone is bound to have it. It's not going to go away this year. It's going to come back until we have a vaccine. But I mean, the immediate thing seems to be that you get a lot more deaths, which is what's happening in Sweden now. The deaths are like accelerating, I believe.
Wow.
And here in Norway, we have it really low. I think it's about 130 now. In Sweden, they have quite a lot more than us. I don't know if it's around 10,000. 1,000, but it's quite a lot more. I think it's about 10 times more. But I mean, there's this kind of debate going around between Norway and Sweden to see. Everyone's kind of saying that our thing might be the best thing, or like what you're doing is wrong. And I think in Sweden, locally, maybe this is something you should ask some Swedish people about, ask Gustav. But, you know, I think locally in Sweden, people are pretty angry at the decisions they've made. But we'll see how it goes. But I mean, they have a lot more kind of immediate deaths for sure. So it's definitely an issue. And we'll see. But I mean, in Norway, we have like this kind of weird sense of, I mean, we even have a term for it that's very special. We have a term, it's a word called dugnad, which is like it's a weird word that's like almost impossible to translate to English, but it means like, if you kind of translate it directly, it would mean like volunteer work. But it's basically something like, if you live in a building, it's like, use this term for like one time a year, everyone in the building meets and they kind of like clean everything outside, and there's like, you cut the grass and cut the bushes or whatever you do. Like, it's this kind of thing where you all work together to kind of like get everything sorted in order. And they kind of use this term for Norway now. So I guess it's this kind of spirit of everyone that's like participating in this and like doing their effort to make sure it goes away and to make sure we can control it, like not many people die, and like, you know, it's very much kind of that spirit, like everyone's doing it together for a cause.
Right.
So,
it kind of sounds like being patriotic mixed with a little bit of spring cleaning. In America, we would say
exactly. Yeah, it definitely is. But it's like a term for it that everyone use a lot, and it's like something we all know, which is kind of something they've used to define it, I guess. This kind of like isolation, which is interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
It's really,
all right.
To me, it's like very, very like peasant, like everyone's. I think it actually comes from when like farmers used to all meet and like put up a barn, like that term.
Wow. I definitely want to hear more about that. Oh my God, the Norwegian culture is so interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. As we start to wrap up, one of the last questions that I always ask my guests is their thoughts on the media. And the news and how they've been getting information and how the media has been handling the situation. Here in America, to me, it feels extremely overwhelming. And the more I talk to people, I realize all of the world globally kind of more or less sometimes gets their information from American news media sources. But I'm just curious if you had any thoughts on how the media is handling the situation, if there is any Norwegian local media that you would talk about versus American media, and specifically kind of how it has affected people's mental health.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting topic, and I think this kind of goes, you can talk about this just outside of this virus situation as well. Like the media landscape in the US has kind of changed in the last few years, I think, and it's like a weird case. It's very divisive. It's very like, it feels very like kind of confrontational. It feels like people are trying to kind of put people in boxes. It's very much about being on the left or the right, or you're like liberal or Republican or whatever. It's like all these, it feels just very, very divisive. And I guess, yeah, I feel the same way about this. It feels like people are blaming each other. People are, you know, the US blaming China, China's blaming the US. Locally, it's like there's an election going on that makes it even worse. And it's all this. I mean, I think it's just a weird thing that we probably could talk about for ages. And I think it goes a lot deeper than this coronavirus. I think it comes down to like an issue in the media where everything is more like clickbaity. It comes down to like controlling the voters. It comes down to, you know, a lot of these things, like media there is very like, you have media that are liberal, or you have media that are kind of tied to the Democrats or the Republicans, and people are taking like stands, which, I mean, in this situation, I've tried to kind of avoid US media or international media, and I've actually just read a lot more Norwegian media, which, I mean, there just isn't that much like things to be confrontational about in Norway. So, I mean, it's just less of it. So the landscape is very different here, and it's very much like reporting the news still. I mean, it's still clickbaity to some extent, but it feels like you're actually reading news and not being kind of given a meaning or like someone's view. And, you know, I think it goes on both sides. Like, I mean, obviously I'm not a Trump supporter, but I think the Democrats are kind of like going crazy in the media too. I mean, as much as the Republicans, I think it's like crazy on both sides. As much as I think Trump has been a terrible president and he's been terrible all along, and he's terrible now, I think the Democrats are kind of wild too, especially how they talk in the media.
Yeah.
So
there's absolutely a lot of hysteria on both sides, I would say. And I think it has a lot to do with what you mentioned, like clickbait, and it's about like holding like the attention of the audience. And unfortunately, I think when money gets involved, like it's just like there's a lot of opinion pieces I've seen where really it doesn't like give you any concrete information. You know, it's opinion on like, if this happens, it is bad. If this happens, it is worse. And it's like, how is that news? That's not news. That's kind of scaring. It's like news should be, you know, stay inside, wash your hands, don't touch your face. Like there's not much more else to say, in my opinion. I mean,
totally. It's
yeah.
It's being kind of like, you feel like you're being swayed in a direction for sure. And it's not great. And I think it's not as much it's a problem of the government as well, but it's a problem of like the media landscape in general. And it's not just this coronavirus, it's everything. It's like in general, like how we kind of read media and how we kind of use it and how powerful people use it. And I mean, that's another thing that I guess, like, I don't know, my optimism around this kind of comes from hoping that this kind of gives a power shift, both like locally and globally. And I do think that's going to happen. You know, I feel like, just locally here in Norway, there's people that are going bankrupt. They're like insanely rich and they were insanely powerful, but then they had all of their all their companies and stocks and things are in like travel or like hotels or like an airline or whatever. And there's kind of this disruption that is happening that I'm quite optimistic about, to be honest. Even for our own business, like, we're a small like advertising agency, and I feel like going out of this, it's going to be a big shift. Like, the more disruptive you are, the more flexible you are. People aren't going to have that much money. So, you know, the giant like advertising agency that employ thousands of people, it's going to be hard for people to use companies like that. And, you know, I think if you look at the balance sheets of a GM compared to a Tesla, you know, Tesla is going to probably come out swinging out of this, you know. It might as well be the only American car company in 5 to 10 years, because these other people haven't like converted their factories to like electric vehicles. And, you know, there's feels like there could potentially be a massive power shift. And I think I'm pretty optimistic about that.
Yeah, that's something that we didn't touch on at all is your business in China right now. What's been going on with that? Have you guys had any projects coming in, or has it been like in general, February is usually dead because of Chinese New Year. But how has it been?
That's one thing you can probably say that's a bit lucky that kind of happened now around Chinese New Year, because we kind of expect that to we expect not to really earn any money during that time anyways. But, you know, it's definitely been tough because we've been double hit, because we had this kind of huge lockdown period in China where we couldn't do anything. And then it felt like right when China was getting normal, we're like, yes, we can go back to work now. Things kind of starting to get normal. That's when like a lot of our clients, which is mostly global clients, they kind of got hit in their countries. And that kind of like shocked them, and like they kind of stopped everything. And we have a massive amount of projects that got stopped or that are canceled or whatever, on hold, whatever. But, you know, China is definitely coming back now. So it's been a long period where there hasn't been really anything. And that's terrible. But, you know, now China seems to be coming back, and like things are kind of flying again now, luckily, which I'm really happy about. And things are kind of seems to be picking up, like, knock on wood, like it seems to be really going in China. Like, no one can shoot stuff outside of China, produce content outside of China. So everyone's asking to do stuff there, which is, so it seems to be like everything's coming back online now. But, you know, I'm just glad we've kind of had like our business have been like a lean business, and we've kind of been smart about how liquid we are, like our liquidity and things like that, and kind of kept small overheads, which is great. So, that kind of gives us the flexibility to come out strong out of something like this. But we've definitely we've invested loads of money in our Tokyo office, and probably is not the best timing for that. Like, you know, but that's like something you have to just take as it is. But
Sure.
I'm very optimistic. Yeah, I'm hugely optimistic about like going forward now. Even though there's definitely been tough times for everyone in China, really.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think we could be way worse off. So I'm happy still that we're in as a good position as we are in now.
It seems that yeah, as you said, like things seem to be going back to normal in China. However, they have closed the border to all
Yeah.
foreigners. Anyone who even though me and you have residence permits inside of China, we are barred from entering. As a business owner, do you have any resources to get information about, like, that's a pretty serious thing to stop you from coming back to the country where, I mean, that's the foundation of your livelihood. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I feel like I have no idea what the situation is. I feel like it's hard to kind of know what's going on. I'm not really going to try to go back to China like immediately. And I think I'm just going to wait and see what happens in the next couple of weeks at least. And I mean, we're still working a lot, and I'm working remotely, of course, with the team here in Shanghai and in Japan. But I mean, the one thing, like the biggest challenge for us is just getting like kind of directors and like kind of people that we work with. No one is able to come back to China, or like a lot of people that we normally work with has left before this. So I mean, I think resources are pretty scarce, but I think it's all good.
Yeah, absolutely. I know a little bit about, obviously I know a little bit about Push, and all media agencies kind of rely on getting outside, like directors, for example, to come into China. So that's interesting to see how like so many companies are affected in so many different ways because of this situation. I'm very curious to see what the future will hold as well.
Totally. Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting. We'll see how it turns out.
Absolutely. So my final question for all my guests is, what do you think the future will hold? And I think we just kind of crushed that. But
yeah, we kind of cover that.
Yeah.
I mean, very optimistic in general, but I really hope obviously I hope it's going to pan out as good as it can be. I mean, it's already a terrible situation, and so many people have died. And I'm optimistic because you see people like doing interesting things and trying to find like vaccines, and there's like new technologies they're using to find vaccines. And I mean, I'm really hoping that that's gonna not take too long, and that we can kind of come out of this situation in a good place. But of course, it's terrible for a lot of people, and I mean, people out of work, and there's a lot of terrible situations.
Absolutely. We could talk for so much longer about this. We definitely have to set up a official Observing the Process episode. This is a special Corona Stories episode. But when we're both back in Shanghai, look forward to meeting up with you, man. Thank you so much for talking.
Yeah, let's do it. All right. We'll talk soon, man.
Later, Kristian.
Cheers.
Stay safe.
See you.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Boom. That's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this podcast valuable, there are many ways you can support it. The best way is by going to my website, observingtheprocess.com. For just $5 a month or $50 for the year, you can become a monthly supporter. This show relies on listener support to stay on the air, so if you find this content valuable, I hope you will consider subscribing. You can find a link to subscribe in the description of this podcast. If you can't support monthly, no worries. You can help out by rating and reviewing on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen. You can share it with your friends, you can blog about it, or discuss it on your own podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, you can subscribe to my channel and like this video. Thank you for supporting the show. Listeners like you make it possible. If you are looking for information on how to protect yourself and stay safe from COVID-19, please get information from the CDC or the World Health Organization. Also, if you enjoyed the intro and outro music, it was made by my brother, Danny Greenberg. You can go and check out his beats on Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, or SoundCloud. He goes by the name Estoric, Estoric. All right, that's it for now.